Hello, everybody. Would like to welcome everybody to this Vivid Virtual Lug Group event. We're going to be discussing how AI is revolutionizing functional testing. Once again, on behalf of our speakers, welcome. My name is Mike Warner. I am a QA automation specialist at FCCI Insurance Group in Sarasota, Florida. We're having lovely weather. I wish everybody in the country was having weather like we are. I am one of the Florida Lug co-leaders with Vivid, and I am honored to be able to host this event. Today, we're going to have two speakers speaking. The first is Don Jackson. He is an ADM solutions architect with Microfocus. And of course, he's going to have more introducing himself here in a minute, but with over 20 years of experience with the whole ADM, ALM, test director, quality center, the whole gamut of applications. We also have Randy Hozeski, who is an automation test engineer with Haworth, who has been using these products as well for a number of years. And I'm sure we're going to get a lot of great information through these. I personally, being a functional automated tester myself, am really looking forward to hearing this presentation. Before we get started, we have a little bit of housekeeping that we need to do. First of all, a session is being recorded, and after the session is done, it's going to be available to all Vivid members. So if you know somebody that might be another member that wasn't able to attend today for one reason or another, they will absolutely have access to this recording. As far as questions go, if you could please just add your questions to the questions pane in the GoToMeeting little control window. You can see it here. And just right there in the middle, there should be a little section for questions. Just type your question there. We'll take a look at them, and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end after the presentation is done. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Don Jackson. Don, thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and welcome everybody. Today's topic, we're going to talk about AI and how it's really revolutionizing the test automation industry, including the ability to finally achieve a shift left, to steal my own thunder, to shift left into a sprint zero or a design phase of your project, depending on what methodology you're doing. So as was stated, my name's Don Jackson. I've got over 20 years experience. I spent the first 17 years of my career as a customer, as a user of these solutions. I've started and managed test automation teams, testing architecture teams, performance engineering teams, so a lot of real life experience in the field. I just want to make sure everybody's aware. We have our Microfocus Universe event that's coming up on March 23rd and 24th. Hyperlinks here of how to go get registered. It is at no cost, and it's a great opportunity to come in and hear what's going on in the event. Sorry, it looks like my machine has decided not to forward slides anymore. There we go. So it's an opportunity to come hear what's going on, what's come out recently, what's coming out in the short term, meet with and hear from leaders inside the product teams. And it's really just a great opportunity as well to virtually, in this particular case, build your network and do networking. So we at Microfocus kind of have this new mantra of high tech, low drama. So we want to make sure that we follow pragmatic, disciplined, customer-centric innovation to deliver trusted and proven solutions. When I say trusted and proven solutions, I, as a customer back in the day with Test Director, when Test Director 7 came out, there was no way I was going on Test Director 7. I was going to stay on Test Director 5 at the time until at least a couple patches came out before I could go forward. And that's really changed when it comes to proven solutions, right? We have lots of customers on the latest or the latest -1 releases today, and they're high quality solutions that get delivered out. So from a testing perspective, so why test automation? Why is test automation important? So just kind of set the stage here. So back in the 80s, where testing started to become a discipline, there was really no need to go anything beyond a manual scale because you really only had tens of tests that you had to run, maybe 15, 20, 30 tests, and that was it. So you didn't really have a need for test automation. Fast forward into the 90s, with the boom of the desktop ecosystem, with the Windows operating system getting released, and then towards the end, web emerging, you actually went up by a factor of 10 of tests that you needed to execute. You then had hundreds of tests, which brought in the need for test automation with products like XRunner or WinRunner that came onto the market to really provide that test automation for those desktop applications and a little bit of light web. Go forward into the new millennium, the web becomes king, and we go up once again by a factor of 10 to thousands of tests that need to be executed for a release. And mobile starts to emerge in the marketplace, but doesn't really hit the marketplace really heavily until the very end of that decade. And then you fast forward into the last decade, and we went up again by a factor of 10. So digital first. So the advent of the iPhone and then smartphones, and how everything has a digital market in there, and talking about how you have applications that are delivered across multiple platforms. And we'll give an example of that today, of an application that's delivered across 4 different platforms. And how do you handle that? And so dealing with that, you now have test automation is no longer an option. It is something that's required. And then if we look into the future of this decade, and the future is the future, what we envision and what's being trended in the marketplace is the idea of things. I was just talking with somebody earlier today who has really adopted the smart home mentality. And he just told me, he goes, yeah, I have 230 devices in my house. When you think about smart light bulbs and smart thermostat and a smart refrigerator and all those things, he has 230 devices he has to manage on his network, and that's just for him. And you start scaling that out across the world, and the number of tests that you have to run, I think, are going to go up far more than the factor of 10 that we've seen generationally through the decades. I think it's potentially going into millions. In fact, I have a customer that I deal with that talks about, every month they run 2 to 3 million tests for their releases, and they do monthly releases. So the number of tests has just grown substantially, where test automation is no longer an option. You have to automate your testing. But we need to, in order to do that and do that successfully, we have to start working smarter instead of harder. Right. I remember being a test automation guy and working release weekend and trying to get the monitoring up and running, and working 10, 12, 14 hours after the release to try to get monitoring up and running. Right. We have to be able to change that. So what does that mean, though, to work smarter? Right. So we really need to start thinking about how we do test design, how we do actual test automation, and then the maintenance itself. Maintenance is a huge time sink when it comes to automation. In fact, I remember managing a team. There was a small team of us of four guys, and we got to the point where we reached a saturation point where we said we can't do any new automation, because our three-week release cycle, we were constantly doing maintenance and then runs. We had no time to build new automation. We needed either another person or change the way things have happened. So that brings us to AI, right? So AI, what is AI? So rather than just talk about AI and drill into what we're doing in a testing, I thought it might be good to just kind of level set of what is AI and do it at a very high level. So AI in a nutshell. And so I had a blue screen of death this morning, so I'm kind of limping through today. So AI is an area of computer science, and hopefully my PowerPoint will be able to come back and catch up with me. AI is really an area of computer science that emphasizes creating intelligent machines. And unfortunately, the Venn diagram is not showing right now. I'm going to see if I can get it to come up by stop presenting and represent. There we go. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, it's a very broad concept, right? And you hear the terms machine learning and deep learning. What takes from machine learning into deep learning when you look at this Venn diagram is really being able to have the system learn without supervision. So unsupervised learning is the term that you'll typically hear in that. But there's also a huge aspect of artificial intelligence that's about data science. And as you can see from the diagram there, that data science really comes into that and determining how to deal with the data and what is going on. Machine learning is all about it's all about building the neural network and having synapses get developed and then weighted, and that weighting changing and additional synapses being delivered at different layers. So for example, this icon over here on the left, which is you and I both know this is a home icon. All right, so having the system be able to determine that that's home icon. So with when you talk about machine learning, which does encompass deep learning, but what really makes it deep learning is when you don't have this person who's interacting with it, it's learning on its own. And then you get into more theoretical things of unexplainable result sets that you have to then, as a data scientist, start drilling into that to figure that out. But really the whole goal here is to determine whether or not this is a home or not a home. Very simple idea here. The software in AI is trained to perform tasks, simple tasks initially, and then more and more complex tasks. So, for example, here's a very small subset of training data that would get fed into a model for the purposes of testing, and that would be like the profile or the shopping cart. Well, what are the visual characteristics of a shopping cart? Well, a shopping cart kind of looks like a half of a hexagon. It represents the basket, and it might have a line underneath that representing the shelf underneath that's above the wheels, and then it might have a couple dots, might be filled in or might be have no fill dots to represent the wheels, and then it'll have a thing off to the side representing the handle. Well, you and I, we have the neural network already built, and we have those synapses already built to understand what that is, but we have to teach the computer to recognize what those visual characteristics are. So you can go to just about any e-commerce site out there and find the shopping cart because you know what a shopping cart looks like. We have to teach the computer to do that. And then you go into this, you teach it, you build the neural network, and then you run into testing. How do you test it? So we particularly use F1 scoring, which is a method for testing an AI. Happy to have a conversation about that afterwards about if you want to get into detail what F1 scoring is. I suggest Googling it first to get an idea of what F1 scoring is. But that scoring allows you to change the weighting and test the weighting of what you have in there so that you can get predictive results. And then you finally release that into production. So what does the AI computer vision actually do? Here we go again, it doesn't want to. Having problems with PowerPoint today. AI is based on pattern matching algorithms to give you results, right? So this might be the images that we're looking at, and you or I might be able to recognize, well, that kind of looks like a crane, and this one kind of looks like a road, and this one looks like a rainbow. Well, what the AI is actually doing is looking at a very low res version of that to see that, and then being able to recognize the patterns of that in order to come up with an output. And so eventually what you end up with is that you get a new data. So here's a shopping cart icon that we hadn't had in our training, in our example training, and it can still go in there and recognize it based on those visual characteristics, and then come out with a prediction that that is a cart, and it'll give you a confidence level. So in the marketplace, AI, some of the things that AI are helping outside of testing. So analyzing CT and MRI scans. In fact, I was talking with a customer who delivers an AI system to the medical industry for CT scans, where it looks at the picture and says, is this a benign or a malignant tumor, and the likelihood of that, and sends that information along with the image to the doctor who's going to look at the CT scan. Really cool stuff. And then you think about self-driving cars, so being able to recognize a stop sign and then act, right? So it's not only has to be able to visually see it, but then it has to know how to interact with the car in a natural way to apply the brakes, slow down, and come to a stop at the stop sign. And what if there are people walking past, right? All that kind of stuff is being delivered with AI capabilities. And something probably near and dear to home is that we've all probably experienced is going to a website and you get this little assistant, this digital assistant that comes up and says, "How can I help you today?" And so you type in, "I'm having problems looking for a laptop," and it comes back and says, "I think you meant this." And that's actually an AI engine. Generally speaking, that's an AI engine that's delivering that. And based on your response after that, you're actually acting as the supervised learner for that AI engine. So when we talk about, well, what are our challenges in test automation, though? So test automation challenges that we've had, and once again, PowerPoint does not want to move for me. It's the joys of doing things live. So the challenges we have, first and foremost, is frequent releases, and this has changed dramatically in the last few years with DevOps transformations and adoption of Agile in the last 5-6 years in the marketplace. Things change, and every time that there's a change, you have to go in and maintain your scripts. And then the time and effort you spend on design and execution of those tests, especially when it comes to maintenance. You end up spending, like I said, so much time that you end up reaching that saturation threshold where I just can't create any more tests. And then the last thing is really around the skill set. So doing automation and doing automation well is hard. It's a specialized skill set. It is an engineering skill set. It is not something that's really easy to do in the way that we've done test automation up to this point. You certainly can have some success with a simple record and playback, but anybody who's done test automation for a while will tell you record and playback is a great starting point to get started, but I would never rely on that and say I'm done just by doing a record and playback. And that leads to low automation rates. And we're seeing the needle is actually moving downwards in the industry of the percentage of automated tests versus non-automated tests, and the maintenance costs going up. So spending over half your time just maintaining scripts that you've already built. And why does that happen? So what happens, test automation is supposed to be about maximizing your coverage rate, and you need to be able to minimize your maintenance costs for those. So you frequently, a really good test automation engineer will spend a lot of time in their initial creation because they're trying to make the test as robust and resilient as possible, so that when changes come down the pipe, the test is going to not fail. It's going to continue to work. However, we all run into that issue where you get a new one, and because of the identification, fragile identification in there, your test breaks. The application still works, but your test is reporting a failure, and it's failing because your identification of how you're identifying the object changed. So a true example from kind of today's realities, we have an e-commerce application, and that e-commerce application is actually delivered across, and I apologize again for, it looks like my PowerPoint is not animating forward. That e-commerce application is delivered across 4 different platforms. It's delivered as a Android native application, it's an iOS native application, mobile web, and a desktop browser. And for the sake of this, I'm actually gonna just take this out of presenter mode and just show in here without animations, because we're not able to get it consistently to keep working. So as you can see in here, hopefully you can with the real estate, is I have a profile icon on all 4 of these, and those profile icons are different across the 4 different platforms. And the challenge that we face is to automate a test a business process, those 4 scripts, there needs to be 4 scripts. And I know some of the more senior guys are like, well, I don't have 4 scripts. I use descriptive programming, and I load 4 different function libraries to describe the objects, or I have 4 different object repositories. The whole point is that you have 4 different assets that you have to maintain for the same business process. And that leads to a time to market problem. So it takes you a long time to write those scripts. And then when it breaks due to changes in the application, there's a huge maintenance cost because I have to change that in 4 different places when it comes to the identification. So if I look at so this is a script, a very simple script on that same application using Uft 1501, which as you can see, I have in dark mode, and using Uft Mobile as the mechanism to get to the device to do test automation on the device. And you can see a very simple script that just goes in and sets the username and passwords and hits the login button. Very simple. So I did this recording and it works great. I purposely entered in the wrong password because I'm doing a negative test, and my script runs just fine. So let's have and then overnight in our nightly build, the developer makes a change. So the developer comes in here and it changes the hamburger menu and the shopping cart menu and flips them on the screen. So you and I, as a manual tester, that wouldn't impact us at all. We'd be able to move forward. But what we'll see is that because the default object properties that are used as part of that is the class and then the index, because neither of these have a label on them. And there's not a whole lot of information that iOS is, well, in this case, Android is presenting in there. So what ends up happening is I get this wonderful, that we're all familiar with, run error. And now I have to figure out why my script is failing. It could be that the application's broken, which is the whole purpose of having the test automation, but frequently it ends up being, well, it's not a true failure in the application, it's a false failure. It's a failure because my test script needs to be updated. Now, why did that happen? As I said, the physical object properties changed. So we're looking at this and we say, well, why can't we change the way that we do test automation? What if we could change the automation so that it sees the screen the same way a human does? Because you and I, it wouldn't have mattered that the hamburger menu moved from the left to the right. We would have clicked on it on the right and moved on. So if we do that, what ends up happening is you end up seeing you teach the computer to recognize the objects the same way that you and I recognize the objects. So we talked about the shopping cart. And I'm sure if I asked anybody on the screen to point out the shopping cart, assuming that your eyes are good enough to see it, you'd be able to point over here to that shopping cart. It doesn't matter to you or me that on this one it's in dark mode and this one it's in light mode. This one there's a circle around it, this one it's not. And actually the shape is a little bit different between the two icons. Well, in what we have today with object property base is you actually, what it sees is the DOM, right? The browser DOM in the case of the browser version. And it sees things like XPath and CSS selector and the attached HTML and maybe the GIF file name. That's what it sees. And that's how it identifies it. The other thing that one of our customers that I've done a similar situation with and talked with is that in traditional test automation, properties-based test automation, is if the object that it's looking for is in the DOM and matches, it will find it and act upon it. So if you think about the login button, if that login button, for some reason during the nightly build, the developer accidentally changed the size of the button to be 1 by 1, being 1 pixel by 1 pixel, so it's barely a dot on the screen, your properties-based test automation is still going to find that and click on it. If you or I look at that as a manual tester, we would go, the login button's missing, and we'd stop the test and write up a defect. Well, if we can make the tool recognize it that same way, that visual defect could still be caught by that. So we started looking at the different research areas in AI, right? And AI research areas go all the way from generic problem solving all the way into general intelligence when you talk about like a Skynet becoming self-aware, right? And what we focused on was 3 different areas. Being perception that I've talked about and I've mentioned a lot, computer vision, so being able to recognize it the same way that you recognize it on the screen. And then using supervised or unsupervised learning, depending on the situation, to recognize and be able to process that and learn new images. And then natural language processing, which is shortened for NLP, to help with the test case design. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. How that abstracts itself into what we've delivered. So we use computer vision that kind of represents the human eyes. So you and I can recognize the search button, for example, looks like a magnifying glass. And we know what a magnifying glass looks like. It kind of looks like a capital Q in the English print language, right? So we know, though, that if I ask you to search for something, you'll look for this magnifying glass, you'll click the magnifying glass, you'll type in the value that I told you to search from, and then you'll click the search button again. Well, that's natural way that you interact with that. So having a brain that says, okay, now once I find it, how do I interact with it naturally? And then the natural language processing is being able to write the test in near plain English. So we have for every customer who has current maintenance on UFT1, there is a product in there that you can install that comes with it right now called Codeless, which is in technical preview, which is being able to actually write this in near plain English. It would say search for this product, right? Search for 17T. And instead of having a programmed statement for that. And that's kind of the way that we're going down the path of natural language, and you can check that out. In addition, we also have a heuristics engine that I like to call the analogous word engine. And as you can see in my script says to click the sign in button. That's what the statement says. And on the desktop browser, it finds it just fine and clicks the sign in, right? But if I look at it on the mobile device, you can see that it says login and it still finds it. And the reason is because sign in and login are analogous to each other. Now the score goes down because it doesn't say sign in, it says login. This heuristics engine can be turned on and off as well. So if you have a legal requirement that it has to be this exact text, you can tell it look for this exact text on the screen instead of using the heuristics engine to find it. What that also enables us to do is you can now create test automation off of mockups. So before you even have an application developed, before a single line of code has been written, if you have a mockup, you can create your test automation, put that test automation into your pipeline, and have that automated test ready for as soon as they have the first release of that application in sprint 1 or sprint 2, depending on how you have your project set up. You can do that before the line of code exists. So we're going to jump into a demo now, and that demo is going to be going from design to feedback, execution, and reporting. So from a design perspective, let's see if I can get this to actually play. From a design perspective, so we're going to go ahead and start a new GUI test. And as you can see, it's in dark mode. I can't stress dark mode enough. I love dark mode. I wish every application had it. And I'm going to create a test off of a mockup. So there's a mockup identification under the AI menu, and you point it to a folder, and in that folder, it will say any image file that it finds in there. It'll then render up at the top, and the first one that's alphabetical, it'll actually do an inspection on. And everything that you see on here that's shaded, that is highlighted by the orange box is an AI object that it's recognized. The one that's over right now is a shopping cart. This one's a profile. This is a search. This is a help. Some right arrows, a down arrow over here. And you can then easily take that from your mockup and drag it over into your UFT1 script and have it create the code for you. Now, one thing you'll notice too is that the code's really easy to read, right? It said AI util profile.click. Now, once you have the application actually running, there is a recorder there. So there's an AI recorder. Now, the AI recorder works similarly to the properties-based recorder in that you can have it record your actions, but it actually tests and execute. It creates the code for the AI statement and executes it for you at that time during your recording, rather than having to wait to the end and having to do a run afterwards. So you're actually testing your record, the code being created by the recorder at the time of recording. So it actually significantly speeds up what it takes to do it. You don't have to do multiple runs, troubleshooting your recording. In there, you can also do checkpoints. Does this exist? Does this not exist? And maybe you want to either write that out as a failure. Here's an example of doing a search. So you're telling it to do a search. It created this statement, search for 17T, and actually executed that. Here's an example of just doing a click. And then this one right here is an example of saying, well, maybe I could get multiple results on this, right? And I want to say hit the add to cart for this specific text, and I can create a relation to that. Now, that's actually something that we've got in the properties based as well. It's a little bit more challenging to set up, and it's called VRI, Virtual Relative Index. So it's really easy to have the recorder actually build that for you. And then I can tell it I want to click on that, and it's going to write that code for me. And then I'm going to the checkout here, and I'm going to put in a statement that says find this text to make sure that it's there. Now, you may ask yourself, well, what if the AI engine doesn't recognize what we have in there? What my unique object is? I call them unique snowflakes. Every snowflake's different. Our application is going to be different. So we have a feedback mechanism if it's not being recognized. So we have this safe pay icon, this fictitious service that we have in our demo application called safe pay, and it's not being recognized. Well, you can use the feedback tool to highlight that. There's a pixelation capability in the feedback tool, so that if you have private information, maybe you're an insurance company or you're a healthcare provider, that you need to pixelate out the patient information so that you're not sending that. You can do that as well. And you put in here what it is that goes that it should be identified as, or even if it's not being identified the way that you think it should be, you can actually mark that as it was misidentified and it gave you a false positive. You then type in the information. You can hit save if you have a disconnected UFT machine that's not connected to the internet, and it'll create a zip file on your desktop that you can mail in to us. Or if you have a connected one, you can actually log into the system. If you don't have an ID already, it's really easy to create and send the feedback immediately. Now, what happens to that feedback is it actually gets sent into our R&D organization, and we will, based on the feedback that you wrote there, hopefully you wrote it well enough that it makes sense. Otherwise, we might have to email you to ask you to explain what it is that you meant. And then we will teach the either through supervised or unsupervised learning, depending on the granularity of the feedback and what needs to happen, and update the engine so that you can get, when you get your next version of UFT1, it'll have that updated engine in it. So that's kind of what the feedback is talking about from a feedback perspective. So that the AI model is actually updated. Our AI model is actually updated daily in our R&D organization, but the delivery mechanism is with a UFT1 versions at this point. And that the other thing is that you're not stuck. So to be clear here, you're not stuck. And I know Randy will talk about this as well. So this particular object, it's not recognized at all by the AI engine. that's fine. I can fall back to start using a properties-based script that we all have known and loved over the years. We also have another fallback mechanism that you may or may not be aware of called an insight recording, where you can actually take a screenshot and have it do a bitmap comparison to find the object on the screen as well. I would caution you that that's the third fallback because bitmap comparisons are very fragile. You go from one machine to another and the resolution's a little off and suddenly the bitmap doesn't match anymore. In fact, one of our competitors calls their AI identification, it's actually bitmap comparison when you ask them about it. So I would challenge you, if you're looking at that, ask about, what's my pixel variance threshold? If they have an answer for that, if there's any answer to that, then they're doing a bitmap comparison. The AI engine that we're talking about with computer vision is not doing a picture by picture comparison. It is doing, as we talked about earlier, a visual characteristics, and it's looking for those visual characteristics, and they're weighted such that so that you can uniquely identify and find things on the screen. And then when it comes to execution, as you're probably already aware, you can still execute from integrated with ALM QC, or you can do it with ALM Octane, which uses a CI tool. You can have this get executed from the CI tool. But we also have included in there for the optical character recognition, OCR, different language packs. So you can see right here, I'm taking the same script that I've developed. I'm going to execute it on Chrome in French, and have it go through this process of doing the checkout. And then I'm going to execute it on an iPhone. So in this case, an older one and a 6S in English on that same app. And remember, the login and sign in are different. They have different names across them, and the objects look completely different, but it's the same business process. And then we're going to execute it again on Firefox in English. So you can do this playback not only cross-platform, but also cross-languages if that's a use case that you have. I know I deal a lot with Canadian customers as well, and Canada is a bilingual country, has to be French and English. And we have also a lot of clientele who their end users may be Spanish speaking, so you have to develop your application in Spanish and English, or maybe you have a third language or a fourth language. So you have that capability. And then from a reporting perspective, so the reporting, it's fully integrated into Uft Ai's HTML reporting. So the HTML report that you all know and love today, and the search capabilities that you can do within there in order to look at what's going on, you can still use that today. It actually highlights, if you're capturing snapshot, it shows you what it is that it's acting upon. In those two particular cases, the profile's vastly different. And it also gives you the confidence level down at the bottom there, right? So you can see this one was 91.61% confident that was definitely the username field that you wanted. So a lot of engineers that I've talked to, some of them have voiced this concern privately, right? Maybe I'm a really good QA engineer. Will it eliminate the need for them? Absolutely not. We are not looking to eliminate your job. It is, but it's going to change the way that you do it. And what Chris Trimper from Independent Health has said is it makes it so that I get to work on more interesting stuff. Instead of figuring out what object properties to use, I can figure out, should this object be present on the screen at this time, and how do I get it to be present? And what are the different data scenarios that I need to do in order to positively and negatively test this? Which is far more interesting work that you can do than, well, once again, trying to figure out what properties to use. So the benefits that we're seeing is, you think about if I reduce your count from 4 different assets that you have to maintain to 1, that's a 75% reduction right there. Plus, the objects, the AI identification is more resilient than the properties anyway, so I have to go in and touch my script less often. It's very realistic to get a 70% reduction in maintenance cost. In addition to that, you also have an increase in test automation coverage, because now I can free up my time to work on more stuff. So I talked about, being able to do negative testing as part of your test automation as well. And the test case generator, which is built into Uft Ai, has been there since 14, can help you with that as well. And as you saw, it's easy to create tests. If it's recognizing it, it's a simple act to create the script, speeding up the development time. And then lastly is, even with just the AI SDK inside of Uft Ai, it's very easy to read. It's very easy to understand what it's doing. And even people who are not very technical can start contributing to test automation. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Randy, and Randy's going to actually talk about his individual journey at Hayworth using the AI solutions. So, Randy?
Thanks, Don, and thanks, Vivit, for having me. They asked me a couple weeks ago to speak a little bit from a customer's perspective on how we're embarking on AI. So, of course, I said yes, and here we are. This is exciting stuff because it's pretty new in the last year, I'd say. And I have a few things on this screen that just talk a little bit about Hayworth. I'm not going to read it all to you, but you can take a quick look at it, read it for yourself. I'd probably just like to highlight one of them towards the bottom, which is, we operate in 110 different countries, and we're one of the world's largest office furniture companies in contract and commercial furniture. So that's the one I would highlight the most. We're located in Holland, Michigan, in the United States, and I want to say we're just embarking on this, because we've only been using automated testing for about maybe 5 years. And when Don talks about millions of tests going, I can only say that we've had maybe close to 15,000 tests in the last 6 months, and our average or our pass rate's about 89.4%. So that's not very good. Slide a little bit about myself. I've been doing it for about 6 years, but I've been in the IT and GIS business for about 35 plus years. So I consider that a long time. So I've watched a lot of the changes go through in automation in a long time. So this slide just kind of is a quick overview of the kind of testing that we do. We do, of course, the smoke testing and the unit testing, regression testing. There's manual in there, and the integrated testing on the bottom too. But what I want to point out is the RPAs. We started doing all kinds of RPAs, and what it did was it just changed data. It changed data inside of SAP. It changed data, and it just saved somebody man hours. And we thought that was a good justification for the cost of the tooling and the tools that we use. But RPA was 80% of what we did, and we only tested 20%. So we flip-flopped that to now only doing 20% of RPAs and 80% testing. I mean, the RPAs can be done, too, but we're automation testers and we do testing. We're not here to make a repetitive task automated, even though that's where a lot of the changing happens. A lot of the cost justification for licensing and stuff like that. So this next slide is going to be about how we have our system set up. And there's some things that I'll go through, the pros and cons after this, but you'll notice at the very top, we have 2 pools. One's called a server pool, and then under it, it's called a Win10 pool. So the top server pool is the pool that the testers use during the day. They will use them and bounce tests off them and make sure that they're operating correctly. The Win 10 pool is for business users that have something that we automated for them, and those are dedicated for business processes. And if you look on the bottom, the licensing server at the bottom, we use the AutoPass to dish off concurrent global licensing to any one of the pools, the Win 10 or the server pool. And then we have our ALM application server in the bottom left-hand corner. What's not shown on here is the Azure DevOps Cloud. Azure DevOps Cloud is what works in conjunction with the app server. So the testing team uses the server pool during the day, but at night, the whole server pool is got tests triggered to it from Azure. So a lot of the testing happens off hours. And using the Azure DevOps pipeline to trigger tests worked pretty well. And we used to use Jenkins when Don talked about the CIs that you can use. We just decided to change from Jenkins because Azure DevOps is what the developers use. And now using that, the developers, if they're going to push a new build, they can now leverage any of the tests that we created in ALM inside of their pipeline before the development will deploy. So they have that option to do that. Right now, we run a lot of them pre-deployment and then post-deployment, and then they see the testing police guys come at them because something's wrong. So there's a lot of pros and cons and things that we've learned by putting this structure in place. And in the next slide, I can go through some of those pros and cons. And I like to start with the cons because it allows me to end on a positive note. But the cons are that it won't work in SAP when it's a non-web GUI, a non-SAP web GUI. So we're a pretty heavy SAP shop, but it works extremely well for the web services. And then in the web services, and if there's a web table, they can be kind of challenging using AI. But I'd like to step up a little bit to the pros because it's repository-less. It's awesome when you don't have to sync a .tsr file and a .qfl file. So if you're working with functional libraries, you always have to sync your properties with your TSR file that goes along with it. Well, with AI, you can intertwine your repository and repository-less objects and elements. I would say another good pro is the AI awareness, that you can run a script that's already done and defined itself, but when you turn that checkbox on, the AI awareness will tell you, hey, this object is identified and you can replace it with this instead of what you're using in a property based. And then of course, the AI recorder, that's an amazing add, and it's just like the regular recorder in Uft. So, but the biggest one in the pros is the Uft AI Customer Club. They come alongside you and help you, to identify the features, coding best practices. I mean, I meet once a week with Tashi. But if you're interested in any of that, I mean, getting a hold of Don or Iran or Tashish, they help you through that and will assist you in anything that might be different from the old to the new. Best practices or lessons learned, I liked it in the header here because we're still learning. But if you're going to use AI in your business, I would skip 15.0.1 because all of the new features are in 15.0.2 that I referred to in the pros area. Another thing is because your test works on your local box, it may not work on your remote boxes. So you have to make sure your remote boxes and your remote hosts have the same version of UFT on it then that you were developing with, and just make sure all your machines are running the same version of UFT. And I want to add to that too is make sure each one of your machines have the same resolution settings as Don was pointing out before, because if they're not the same, it can pick up different objects in different locations, especially in the property-based. So I don't know if I have anything else, but we found that using the AI is changing the way that we're writing our scripts, and we're adding it to our framework slowly because, of course, we want to make sure the tests are stable. But what we do is sometimes there's a tricky object that that AI may not recognize. Oh, just leave the property-based code there and it still works. And you don't have to maintain a whole lot, so it's not like everything changes totally, but it's just a new approach to making it easier for maintenance, one thing, because you're only adjusting a .qfl, your functional library is the only thing that you're changing, and you don't have to go in and change the repository side of things. And you can reuse, once it's in your library, you can just copy and paste them to different functions that may need the same commands. So thanks for letting me share. I hope that made sense. And if there's any questions, you can start throwing them at us.
So thanks for that, Randy, for sharing your journey. So we're to the Q&A section here. So we've got some questions. Here's one specifically for you. I apologize. I can't help myself, right? So, Mike, if you need me to stop, just say so. But there's one here specifically for you, Randy, is from somebody that said, have you thought about using the SAP GUI for HTML, which is a capability in SAP so that you can leverage the AI part for your SAP testing?
Yeah, good question. However, that would mean the whole company needs to change, right? Or, well, not necessarily. We test with what the users are doing when they do their processes. So it's part of it would work, but it's not what the users are doing. So if we copy or reuse what the users are clicking on in the same environment that they're using, it's a more one-on-one test to what the users would be performing. There's also other ways of doing the same thing that we're doing, and I'm sure there's a number of them out there that have their own ways of doing things, but I think there's a lot to be said about keeping it to what the users use, then manipulating it so I can at least get the test done. So it's like running an API and not doing anything with it. I want to validate the API, so I'll run the API and then I go straight into SAP and I'm going to validate that the API was correct.
Awesome.
So does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, so we have some other questions that have come in. So we have a time for a couple more. So one question was, is AI totally different than smart identification? Yes, it is. It is a completely different feature. It is, and is it? The question is it a rewritten feature within UFT? Smart identification is still there. It still works for properties based. Smart identification, for those of you who don't know, it leverages other when you don't have an exact match for the properties that you have defined in your object repository. It will leverage additional properties, assistive properties for that particular class. and compare it against what you had when you originally created the object to try to find it, even though your definition doesn't match. It can be kind of time consuming for it to do that with smart identification. There's a number of different user forum posts that talk about, they always turn off smart identification when they're doing their runs to increase speed. But the AI is completely separate. It is using a computer vision engine to be able to identify the objects, and also neural networks to be able to determine, once it finds it, how to interact with it. Is completely separate. The one other thing that I would point to that too is that if you remember the slide that I had up, and if my PowerPoint was working, I would just switch to it, but we've seen my challenges with PowerPoint today. It is an abstracted engine as well. So that same engine is being accessed for UFT developer early access version 16. And the plans, obviously going forward is that it'd be the same engine for both solutions, UFT 1 and UFT developer. So what document types other than images can be used as a mockup? So as long as it's, I use the example in here as well for a PowerPoint. So something was created in PowerPoint. All I did is I used what's it called? The snipping tool in Windows to take a picture of what was in PowerPoint to convert it into an image file. So the mockup identification is using image files, but anything that you can render as an image, you could potentially do that. In fact, I did one case where I had drawn on a piece of paper what a login screen might look like, took a picture of it with my phone, emailed it to myself, and then opened up that picture, and it was able to recognize some of it. Unfortunately, my handwriting is terrible, so some of the characters weren't recognized correctly, but it recognized, for example, the login box as an input box, and I had drawn that on a piece of paper. It's really cool, and it's something that you can do yourself too. Draw up, take some time and draw up on a piece of paper, and then take a picture of it, and then put that image and have the mock-up identification or the inspector bring that up in a browser, and you'll be shocked that even hand-drawn stuff you can start to recognize. So I think probably the last question that we have time for is, what percentage of objects can an AI model replace need for object repository? Is the goal to eliminate the dependence on the object repository? Yes. So ideally, we would love to get to the point where you can be 100% reliant on AI to recognize objects and identify them. Is it there yet? And will we ever achieve that goal? I don't know that the answer will ever be yes, because as we extend out to like the desktop world, you could have some widget that is just completely unique to your environment that AI is just not going to be recognized by the AI engine, where you're going to have to revert back to properties based. But yes, I have an example, a video out there on YouTube showing using SAP Fiori, the SAP Fiori demo site that SAP hosts, which is a shopping cart. And I had it 100% object properties. I used the AI assistant to tell me what it is I could change to, and I was able to 100% get rid of my object repository and completely convert to AI. That's a great case. What I'm seeing for my own personal experience with all the automation I do as part of my job, I'm getting on the low side on some very custom applications, 70 to 80% AI, and on the high end, 95 to 99% AI recognized objects. So, and there's been huge changes, as Randy said, between 1501 and 1502. AI grows as the longer it's around, the more that it grows. And one of the big advantages that you'll see from version to version is from 15.0 to 15.01 to 15.02, each version, there was a 10x improvement on the number of objects it's able to recognize as native objects. So, so I'm going to hand this back over to kind of do our wrap up here. So, Mike.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Randy, Don. This was really great information. I know I'm right now kind of itching to get download 15.02 and start playing with this a little bit myself, just to see what I can do. Like just a couple of little things that here at the end. Basically, this session will be available on demand. Our virtual community days that we had just a little bit ago. We went over Agile, DevOps, testing, everything. All of those recordings, all of those sessions are available through the Vivid website. Please go out there, take a look at them, and you can get a lot of great information from them as well. Upcoming, as Don mentioned, Universe 2021 is coming up. It's coming up pretty soon, just at the end of March. Go ahead and register for that. We're talking a lot of great information. A lot of great sessions are coming up with incredible speakers. There's all these reasons to attend. For me, it's personally, for me, it's great being that it's all virtual. We don't have to travel, which everybody I think is kind of glad with right now. But it just makes it really easy to pop into the sessions and watch your sessions wherever you're at, wherever you're at. Once again, thank you so much for being here. Please, at the end of this, there will be a survey sent out. Please take a moment, and we would really appreciate if you could fill that out. And the link will be sent as well. Here's just some quick information, links. If you have any more questions, please feel free. You can email Dan or Don. You can email Randy. And all this is available through the Vivid World website. Also, with the you're also in the link here at the end. There will be a after you take the survey, everybody gets a complimentary $25 dining card. So you definitely want to fill out the survey, and that is for anybody in U.S. and Canada only. And this is offered to us by Microfocus, and we really appreciate it. So once again, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Randy, for presenting, and I hope everybody has a great day.